No, Michael. Peter's not here tonight. All right, for our Chinese speakers, I have our Jiangyi. So if your native language is Chinese, we have this to pass out tonight. Very thankful for our translation team, which takes care of that. This week was Julie, so Julie, thank you very much. Really appreciate you translating. And I can just tell you that's not an easy job to translate the language that you preach in. I think that's a very difficult thing to do, probably especially the stuff that I write. So, all right. So tonight we're in Exodus chapter 14. So if you have your Bibles or your electronic devices, you might flip over to Exodus chapter 14. You remember what's been happening with the Hebrews, and Moses has been called by God to bring them out of Egypt. And so Moses went to Pharaoh, said, "Let my people go." And remember, we learned, he didn't just say, "Let my people go." He said, "Let my people go that they may worship me, that they may serve me." So God didn't just call them out so they could, be free to do whatever. He called them out so they would serve him. So finally, after God brought the plagues, 10 plagues upon Egypt, the final plague being the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh was willing to let them go. I guess forced to let them go. I don't know if he was willing, but he was forced. And now they've come to the Red Sea. And Pharaoh has had a change of heart. They've arrived at the Red Sea, and I think it's really important when you read the Bible. Sometimes I think, even myself, I read the Bible and I read it casually. Okay? So what I mean by that is I read it and I don't really pay attention to the details, to what is actually going on. So let's think for a second. How many people came out of Egypt? Best guess, best estimate, 2 to 3 million people. Do you know how many people that is? That's the population of Taichung City. Okay? That's like if everybody in Taichung left walking to Taipei. That's crazy, right? That's insane, but that's what happened. So they're walking to Taipei and they run into a large body of water and they can't get across. And then Pharaoh decides, hey, wait a second. Remember what started the plagues? What did Pharaoh say? Who is God? Who is God that I should worship him? Who is God that I should obey him? That was the trigger that triggered the plagues. And God said, "You want to know who I am? I'll show you who I am." And Pharaoh now is kind of back again at that point. He says, "Hey, you're going to take my slaves? Well, I think I'm still in charge. I'm going to send chariots." At that time, chariots were the weapon of choice. To be a military power, chariots were the most destructive thing you could have. So Pharaoh sent 600 chariots after the Hebrews, and the point was they were going to kill them all. They were going to destroy them all. He said, "If you're not going to serve me, you're not going anywhere. We'll just kill you all." So now they're trapped. They're on the edge of the water, and they're trapped. So we're going to pick up the story in Exodus chapter 14, verse 11. It's a long reading, okay? I'm going to read the whole rest of the chapter, but it's important for the message tonight. So let's look at it. Now, the Hebrews are speaking to Moses, okay? Not all 3 million of them, but I'm pretty sure the grumbling worked its way up to the leadership, okay? They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. Now the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go in after them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Israel, between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea dry land. And the waters were divided. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and of cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen of all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. This is the word of the Lord. All right. So what are we doing? Well, I told you a few weeks ago, I'll say it again. We're looking at these Old Testament stories because it's the only way to know what does the Bible mean when it talks about salvation. What does it mean when the Bible talks about sin? What does it mean when the Bible talks about repentance? You see, modern people, we don't really like those words anymore. We want to be spiritual. You know, that's a common, at least in the West today. People say, I just want to be a spiritual person. I want to have a spiritual experience. But really, to be a Christian, you have to use these words. You have to use the words. You have to say, I'm saved. That's what the Bible says. You have to use the word sin. And how do you know what that means? We can't define it in modern terms. We can't define it in terms of psychology or law or other things. The Bible tells us what it means. And how do we know what it means? The Bible tells us stories. And we learn what it means in the stories. So the Bible tells this story in Exodus, and God is giving us a picture of what does it mean to be saved. what does it mean to be saved? So that's where we are tonight. What does it mean to be saved? And that's what we're going to learn. And I hope you'll really get this tonight. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul actually likens Christian baptism. Some of you have been baptized. You know what that is? Some of you don't know what it is. That's okay. In baptism, in Christian shoshi, in Christian baptism, what we do is we take a person and we put them underwater. They come back up. And Paul says, actually, Christian baptism is like this event. Why? Why would Paul put these two things together? I'll tell you in just a minute. You got to stay with me, okay? All right. So we're going to answer a couple of questions tonight. Do you need to be saved? Do you need to be saved? What does it mean to be saved? What do you need to be saved from? All right? What do you need to be saved from? That's a good question. If I say you should be saved, then I guess maybe you should ask, what do you need to be saved from? How does God help us escape from what we need to be saved from? Okay, in this story, what's happened? These Hebrews, they're on the edge of death. On the edge of the Red Sea, they're under a death sentence. The Egyptians are coming. If they don't get across, if they don't escape, if something doesn't happen, they're dead. They need to be saved. Do you not see? This is what it means to be saved. This is part of what it means to be saved. You're under a death sentence. Every person is under a death sentence, and we need to be saved. All right, so first, what must we escape from? So Pharaoh, we've already covered this, has let the people go, and now he's had a change of heart. He's coming after them. And the Hebrews look up, and they see their trap. And one of the interesting things, and listen, this happens to all of us, we get a little bit delusional about life. Did you notice what they said? Hey, Moses, did you bring us out here because there were no graves in Egypt? It was so much better back there when we were served. Did you notice the language they used? When we were serving the Egyptians. Like they had a better job than they actually thought they had. Have you ever convinced yourself, if some of you have really crummy jobs and you convince yourself you have a better job than you have, you know? Like you're basically a really crummy job, and you're like, I'm like a, you know, sometimes housewives, you know, I'm a domestic goddess. There we go. Thank you. I don't actually know the right way to say that. You know, you're a secretary, okay? I'm an executive assistant. Yeah. No, you're a secretary. Okay, you just got to be honest about these things, right? Okay. So listen, that's what they were doing. They were slaves. They were making bricks. They had to go collect hay and mud and make bricks. We were servants. No, you were slaves. Okay. And what they said was, God, rescue us. They were crying out to God, and now they're saying, oh, we think it was better back there. No, God rescued you. If you go back to Exodus chapter 4, at the end of the chapter, they're totally lying, actually. What happened was Moses came to them. Moses and Aaron came to them and told them that God had heard their cry and he was going to bring them out. And they were so happy. They worshiped God. They're delusional now. Sometimes what happens is this. You find out, you figure out that actually you need to be saved, but you get a little delusional about it. You convince yourself, I'm not that bad off. Yeah, I kind of understand what that guy's talking about, but that doesn't apply to me. He doesn't mean me. That's somebody else. That's for the really bad people. You're delusional. Don't be like the Egyptians. Don't be like the Israelites. Here's the point that I want to make. Let me make one more instance. If you were the Israelites, the Hebrews, okay? And okay, this is the ultimate delusion right here. You had just seen 10 of the most amazing, miraculous things happen in the world. And now you're on the edge of the Red Sea, Here come the 600 chariots to kill you. Moses, the guy, right? He's got like the miracle staff, he turns it into a snake, he can, do amazing things. What should you say? Hey, Moses, number 11, right? We got 10, let's go for number 11, lightning or something. But they don't even bring God up. God is not even in the picture for these people. They're stupid. They're idiots. Oh, sometimes we are too. Sometimes God's not even in the picture for us. I know, honey, it's okay. Sometimes we're totally out of it. We get completely under our circumstances. And we forget about God. We forget about everything. Here's the point. What is God bringing them out for? Freedom? What is freedom? Today, in almost all the cultures of the world, there's a move toward personal, individual freedom. Everybody wants to be free. Right? So we want freedom. I want to be free. Well, listen, what's happened here? They were in slavery, right? Now God has brought them out. They're no longer slaves. They're free. Are they free? How are they acting? Are they acting free? No, they're not free. They're in fear. Who is truly free in this moment? Moses. Think about Moses. What's he saying? Hey, stand firm. Don't worry. God's got this. God will take care of us. Why are you quivering? Why are you whining? God will take care of us. Why is Moses the only one who's truly free? He's not worried. Because Moses has already been brought out. And Moses has already been to the fire of God. Moses has already seen God. The Israelites, unfortunately, haven't been there yet. They haven't gotten to the mountain of God yet. They haven't been brought to him yet. They think they're free, but they're not. What is real freedom? Let me give you a different understanding of freedom than the modern view. I really want to process this with you for just a second, because I think this will really help you. Every one of us has to live for something. Think about that for just a second. Every one of you is living for something. I'll say it that way. Every one of you is living for something. I don't know what you're living for. I can give you some broad categories, but it really becomes very personal. It can be money related, it can be power related, it can be sex related, it can be, I don't know, popularity related. All these things have some real broad categories, but for every one of us it becomes very personal. It can be family related. Everybody's living for something. That something becomes for you a master. It becomes for you a master. The reality is nobody's free. Nobody's free. Everybody, and here's the reason why. Nobody wants their life to be meaningless. Think about it. Not one of you in this room would. I don't think I could sit down with any one of you in this room and you would say, Todd, I've been thinking life over and I just really want to live a meaningless life. I don't think any of you would say that. I think almost every one of you would say, I really want my life to mean something. It doesn't mean you want to be, known worldwide. That's not what I'm saying. But I really think every one of us wants in some way for our life to mean something. To someone. Maybe our family, maybe our friends, maybe a broader group. Why? Oh, dear friends, why Are you able to post something on social media and then not look at the likes? I doubt it. Why? Because you want it to mean something. It's just a small evidence of what I'm talking about. I'm as guilty. I'm not pointing a finger. I got one pointing at you and 4 pointing back at me, okay? I'm just as guilty as any of you. We all want our lives to mean something. Now, whether you live for something, whatever it is, you're serving it, it is controlling you. It actually is defining your significance. Okay, think about it. Let me give you just a specific example. If money is your master, then you will serve it. You will. You'll need more of it. You'll need to control it. You'll need to put it somewhere. You'll need to hide it. You'll need to use it. You'll need to manage it. But actually, it will end up managing you. That's what happens. So you can just substitute whatever it is that maybe, hopefully, God is revealing to you. And you're going to say to yourself, oh, no, money doesn't master me. I master my money. I'm in control. The reality is, it will master you. It will master you. You will be in a fight. You will be in a fight always. And whatever you're living for will control and enslave you. And listen, it can be a bad thing or it can be a good thing. You might think about your family, okay? Think about, a family is a good thing, right? There's plenty of good things in this world. But your family can actually control you to your detriment. A spouse or a child, think about this. Some parents, they live for their children. That's what they'll say. Oh, I'm living for my children. Actually, your children are controlling you. So you do everything for your child. What happens when your child rejects you? This is my last point. What happens when you lose the approval? What happens when you lose the control of whatever it is that you're trying to master? It's actually mastering you. Then you'll be destroyed. Are you with me? You understand? See, all of us, we're not free. As much as we want to say, oh, I'm free. You're not free. You're a slave. Where does true freedom come from? It comes only, as we see in Moses' life, from getting to and being consumed by God. That's where true freedom comes from. Let me give you one more personal example, just my own marriage, okay? I have a very good marriage. It's not perfect by any means. We have our share of disagreements, quarrels, fights. My children can verify that regularly. But I have a better marriage than I deserve. I can definitely guarantee you that. I think my wife would agree. But for the grace of God, which we both depend on, we would be paralyzed though. I would be so consumed with worry that she might reject me or she might get sick and die. But you see, I trust wholly in God that He is my hope. He is my source. And I have to do that every day. That when we do have a quarrel, when we do have a fight, it doesn't end our marriage. And when things are going great, I don't place all my hope in her. My hope's in Christ. Okay? All right, I hope this is making some sense for you. All right, now let's get to the good stuff, okay? I know time's running out. How does God save us? What is the point of this story? I told you they're on the edge of the Red Sea and they're under a death sentence, right? The Egyptians are coming to kill them. How does God save us? He saves us with a decisive action. The Hebrews are under condemnation. They're under condemnation. In just a moment, though, they're set free. The moment they step into the dry ground of the Red Sea, they're saved. In one, it's like this red line. On one side, death is coming. But in just a moment, they're free. The moment they step into the dry ground of the Red Sea, they're saved. How does that work? What's going on here? The second thing that we learn about how God does salvation is this. Listen. Salvation is completely different from every other religion. God's salvation is completely different from every other religion. This, you've got to get this tonight, okay? In Buddhism, Taoism, frankly, every other ism in the world, it really doesn't matter what country you go to or where you live. You can be, let me use this word, you can be converted. You can be converted. I can convert to Buddhism. How would I convert to Buddhism? Well, I need to go to a Buddhist master and get a book and begin to study, and it's a process, right? One day I'm, starting the process, and then slowly over time I become this, and then I graduate from level to level to level. In Christianity, you don't do that. In one moment, you're not a Christian, and the next moment, you are. That's it. In Christianity, you don't go through some long process of becoming a Christian. You either are or you're not. There is a definite moment where you are not a Christian, and then there's a moment where you are a Christian. Why? Why is this true about God's salvation? Because it has nothing to do with you. Let me give you something to think about. When Moses sticks his hand out over the water, sticks his staff out over the water, and the water parts into two gigantic walls, do you think there were some people who probably went, awesome, amazing, we've been waiting for God to do this, and they just ran in, right? I think there were some people like that probably. We've been waiting for God to do something like this. But don't you think there were some people who probably went, oh no, I'm not going in there. That stuff could come down any second. No, I'm totally terrified of this. So their friends are like, no, come on, we gotta go. Come on, we gotta go. So they're going, no, this is terrible. I don't want to. So some people, their faith was big. They believed God just hugely. Yes, God saved us. Some people just had this little bitty faith. Oh, no, this is terrible. It's going to die. We're going to die. But everybody was saved. Why? Because it had nothing to do with the size of their faith. It had to do with who their faith was in. Who was their faith in? God. It has to do with God. It doesn't have to do with you. Your faith is put into something. It's put into God. And Christianity is a change of status, not a change of character. Christianity is a change of status, not a change of character. When did God give the Hebrews the law? Have we gotten to the mountain yet? Where he gives them the Ten Commandments? We're not there yet. They didn't get there yet. So God didn't say, when they were still in Egypt, he said, hey, by the way, before I get you out of here, we got to go over a few things. Don't steal, don't kill, don't disobey your parents. No, we haven't even talked about that yet. God said, I love you. Come out. I'm going to save you. After they got out, then he says, now, by the way, you're mine. Now I want you to know who I am. What kind of God am I? I don't lie. We'll get to that later, okay? That's a whole other sermon, sorry. He tells them who he is. Christianity, being a Christian, is a change of status. It's going from here, stepping into here. It's not something you do. You don't say, I'm trying to be a Christian. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question right now. Are you a Christian? If you think If you say, well, I'm trying, you're not. If I ask you that question right now, are you a Christian? And you think to yourself, well, I'm trying to be a Christian. You're not. You can't try. It's not about trying to do better or be a better person or do more good. It has nothing to do with you. It's believing in what God says. And God said, hey, I need you to step across the line. Step. Believe me. Trust me. I made a way. There's this interesting thing that happens. The people are, as they get closer, they're complainers, aren't they? The Hebrews, I'm sorry. They're always, hey, God, we should have stayed in Egypt. We were servants, blah, 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 No one is going to save us. And Moses does what? Moses says, hey, don't be afraid. Stand firm. God will save you. God actually, when the people are complaining, God actually rebukes Moses for the people's complaining. He says, hey, get it in gear. Quit your complaining and move on. It's this really interesting moment. And Moses is the one doing the right stuff. The people are the ones complaining. What is happening there is this. Moses is what? A substitute. Moses is a substitute for the people. How do they get across? Through Moses. It's a picture. How do you get across? Through Christ. You see, what happens on the cross is very similar. What happens on the cross is that this incredible flood, this incredible wrath, this storm is coming. And Jesus takes it for you. He takes what you deserve so you can go through. So you can go through. That's what it means to be a Christian. It has nothing to do with what you do. It's change in status. That's what I really want you to hear tonight. I really want you to know. So some of you, if you're not a Christian tonight, I really hope you'll think about this. What does it mean to be a Christian? Are you trying? If you're trying to be a Christian, can I just say something to you? You can't try hard enough. There's nothing you can do. It's about believing on Christ. And afterwards, I would love the opportunity to speak with you more about that. Now, for those of you who are Christians, some of you, you get the idea that you're free. Okay? You're free. What are you free to do? What are you free to do? You're free to live out in everyday life what has already been accomplished for you. God has made it possible for you to live fully. So, in your life, you might be thinking, every day I wake up with these burdens, with these trials, with these struggles, and actually you become like the Hebrews, a little delusional. You forget. That's what happens to us in this world. We forget. You must remember. This is kind of what happens. You end up in it's like you're on the other side of the ocean. You're saved now, and the Egyptians are on the other side, and they're yelling at you, we're going to come and get you. We're coming to kill you. And you believe them. You believe them. You're still afraid. And you forget that God's already saved you. He's already taken care of all of this. so you still live in fear, but you're free. You're free. So tonight, afterwards, if you need someone to pray for you, if you need someone to encourage you, we're here for you. There's plenty of people around the room who would love to do that for you. If you're here tonight and you're not sure if you're a Christian, don't leave tonight without getting that clarified, okay? Don't leave tonight without that. Let me pray for you, okay? As we finish. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for this testimony from your word that shows us what it means to be saved. I know there are some people here tonight who don't yet trust in you. And so I pray that they would be able to put their faith wholly in you, not based on something they've done, but based on what you've done and the kind of God that you are, a rock. And for those of us who do trust in you, I pray we would walk in freedom, serving you daily, living a full life, so that others might know the incredible love of Christ. I pray this in your name. Amen. All right, thanks for being here tonight. Some people are going back to the Italian restaurant we went to a few weeks ago. Faye's got a group going there. Other people, if you're interested in that, talk to her. She's got the address. Other people, you're just find a group and go where you want to go. All right?